Good evening and happy Halloween. We start tonight with a voice I'm sure you'll recognize instantly, even though you haven't heard it on a daily newscast for 9 years. Those friendly, soothing bass tones filled us in on all the major events that outline our recent history. The first moonwalk, the assassinations of the Kennedys and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the Vietnam War. When Walter Cronkite retired from the CBS anchor desk, the sign he hung up on the door on his way out was not "Gone Fishing." It was "Gone Sailing." His days at the helm of the 42-foot ketch, the Winty, started as a compromise years ago. Race car driving had been his weekend passion, but he switched to sailing because the safer sport was more befitting a family man. And now in his retirement, Captain Walter Cronkite has jotted down his tales of his days at sea. First, he and Savannah artist Ray Ellis explored and recorded the eastern seacoast. Then they caught the west winds and chronicled their journeys in watercolors and words.
If the wind is right, you can find the joy, the innocence again. Oh, the candles can do miracles. Just you wait and see. Believe me. Sailing takes me away.
Ray painted the over 100 memories of the journey, and Cronkite added the text. A partnership that, in teasing his buddy, Cronkite claims is as lopsided as their 7 a.m. tennis matches.
The darn trouble with working with you is that nobody reads the words. Coffee table books are not meant to be read. I don't know why you got me involved in this darn thing, writing this text. You know.
Of course, Cronkite knows why Ellis got him involved in this thing. At their book signings in Atlanta, it's Ellis who had to drop his ego and let Cronkite's public pay homage to everybody's uncle.
This is a treasured moment for me. I want you to know that.
It's just such a privilege to meet you.
Well, it's a privilege to meet you.
I've been a fan of yours for a number of years.
Well, I appreciate that.
All my life.
My husband Craig has been so excited all day long.
Well.
Cronkite beams in the compliments. At age 73, it appears his only compromise to age is a hearing aid. The enthusiasm is still abundant, and a wonderful sense of humor that might have been hidden behind the news desk is often on display. It surfaced once when he talked about the naming of his yacht. But the Winty is named for the first woman to fall in love and marry a Cronkite.
We don't know about her falling in love.
Well, we know she married him.
We know she married the guy, but I don't know whether she loved him.
This is the woman who's been his first mate and wife for 50 years. He and Betsy have navigated through waters too choppy for many of their cohorts. How'd you do it in such a public business? Because many correspondents have been married many times, or some marry late. How did your marriage survive?
Well, partly, I think, because my wife had journalistic training. She went to the University of Missouri School of Journalism and practiced for a while before we were married. And I think kind of has the newsroom aura about her and understands the necessity of dashing off at the last minute. And also, she's got a great sense of humor, which is highly important. I think perhaps the most important thing.
It's said Walter Cronkite once joked he'd like to die like Errol Flynn on a 60-foot yacht with a 16-year-old mistress. Feisty Betsy retorted that he'd probably go with a 60-year-old mistress on a 16-foot yacht. The two live in Martha's Vineyard in the summer and in New York City the rest of the year. Their 3 grown children have given them 3 grandchildren. None of his children followed Dad into his business. Why do you think none of the 3 wanted to go into news?
Well, you know, I'm a little disappointed in that. I think the highest tribute that a child can pay to a parent is to go into the same business or profession that that parent's in. So I would like to have had them go into it. It possibly is because, being quite candid about it, my lucky success, purely lucky, but it's there, and a frank acknowledgement on their part that getting the same kind of lucky breaks that I had was highly unlikely for anybody, my children or anybody else.
Of course, Cronkite didn't go into his father's occupation either. Both his father and grandfather were accomplished dentists. But Walter just wasn't drawn to that. Instead, he picked up his profession from an American Boy magazine at the age of 12. He saw an article about newspaper reporting. He dropped out of college to start work with a Houston newspaper, then joined United Press, worked as a bureau chief in London, and saw frontline action in World War II. He came back home to work for CBS News, where he was rooted for 32 years, almost 20 of those as the anchor, a title originally made for Cronkite. In those years, he shared with us the news of emotional moments that are now etched in a generation's memory.
Man on the moon.
Listen,
Oh, jeez.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
He pulled off his horn-rimmed glasses that were later replaced with contacts at the joyous moment of man's first landing on the moon.
Boy.
Okay, we're going to be busy for a minute.
Armstrong is on the moon.
Yeah,
Neil
now,
Armstrong,
land now.
38-year-old American, standing on the surface of the moon. On this July 20th, 1969.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
He shared the news of an assassination which would send the world into grieving.
President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time.
And he kept us informed through the controversial days of war.
Whatever price the communists paid for this offensive, the price to the Allied cause was high.
You know, there's a word in Sweden, it's Cronkiter, which means anchorman. There's a school of journalism named for you, a journalism award named for you. How does it make you feel, since you just did this for the love of reporting?
Well, I think it's an overemphasis on the individual. The thing that bothers me more than almost anything is the little old ladies who'd come up to me in the street and say, "Oh, Mr. Cronkite, I watch you every night. I believe every word you say." I want to grab them by the shoulder and shake them and say, "Please, please, please, no, no. You know, we keep a box score every day, and we have runs, hits, and errors. And there's we make mistakes, and we can be wrong."
The phrase you always ended the show with, "and that's the way it is." How did that come about, being your signature? Whose idea was it?
Well, it was my idea, my phrase, and that's the way it is. You can say a lot of ways. Say, "and that's the way it is," quizzically, "and that's the way it is," kind of sardonically. Say it a lot of ways.
Lots of ways, maybe, but it's difficult to duplicate the original.
He's going to hear me.
That's okay.
And that's the way it is.
That's the way it is today. That's today's date.
And that's the way it is.
And that's the way it is.
Well, it sounds like it'd be a good phrase to use. And our boss, the president of CBS News, Dick Salant, hated it. Absolutely hated it. Shortly after we went on the air, the Vietnam War was escalating. And it became very controversial, of course, our coverage of it, everybody's coverage of it, the war itself. And now Dick called me in and he said, "Walter, you know, you're saying, and that's the way it is after these broadcasts. Are you really sure that's the way it is? I mean, aren't you certifying with that's the way it is that we are absolutely right in everything we broadcast?" I said, "I hadn't thought of it that way."
Now, you do not want that to be the title of your memoirs, which you've had a contract to do for 20 years and are obviously procrastinating about.
Obviously. Quite a lot. Massive procrastination.
Why don't you
Massive and perennial procrastination.
When are you going to do it, and why didn't you want the
Positive
title?
perennial procrastination.
Mr. Cronkite,
Yes.
why are you not doing it, and why don't you want the title?
As far as the title goes, it's more of a joke than anything else. If Random House, Knopf wants to use that title, we can. It's just that it's so obvious that maybe we need it as a subtitle or something. I don't know. And why haven't I written it? Well, let's see. Let me count the ways.
He says his deadline is spring, and he'll start writing it in the spring. Spoken like a true deadline junkie journalist. He says the book won't be an expose on CBS and won't discuss other anchors. Recently, you have gotten a lot of negative publicity and discussion because of remarks you made about Dan Rather, saying that the Persian Gulf crisis in essence saved his job, that he's a good reporter but not a good anchor.
Well, now you see, that's the trap that we all fall into. You're saying, you're a good reporter, you're saying, I said this.
And I should have said alleged, and it went through my brain.
What is your authority for saying it? You read it
Time
in
magazine.
Time magazine. Time magazine never asked me if I ever said that. They never called me. Now, how's this for journalistic ethics? It was never said, those words at all, that they put in quotes.
Well, what did you say?
I don't want to go into it, because if I do, then that just perpetuates this terribly erroneous thing that was there. I can discuss Dan Rather, of course, but why should I? He's a colleague of mine, friend of mine, and a terrific reporter, and a darn good anchorman. And I don't see any reason why I should discuss it. I don't discuss the other anchorman. Why should I discuss the guy at my own network?
Fair enough. Fair enough.
All right.
If Ted Turner would now ask you to come to work for him the way he did several years ago, would you do it?
Oh, well, I don't have a chance to consider that. I still have a long-term contract with CBS.
That contract has him on the board as well as on call for special coverage and reports. And someday, after his memoir is penned and his sailing books reach the end of their run, he might get down to the business of real retirement. But Uncle Walter will keep a place in the memories of a generation who learned to trust that voice.
For almost 2 decades, after all, we've been meeting like this in the evenings, and I'll miss that.
Been a lot of fun. Been a good run.
You can catch Cronkite on an arts and entertainment series about dinosaurs next year. And look for him at the Disney MGM theme park on film, explaining animation with Robin Williams. Now there's an odd couple.